I sat at my glass desk, the New York skyline sprawling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, golden sunlight bouncing off the buildings and painting the room with warmth. My phone buzzed against the smooth surface of my silk blouse, a subtle vibration that made me stiffen. I didn't need another meeting reminder, another investor email. But the name flashing on the screen made my pulse hitch. Claire? The voice was familiar, almost too casual, too confident. My cousin. The same cousin who had once taken the office I'd poured my heart into, the same cousin whose smug smile had haunted my dreams for years. I swallowed, noticing the faint scent of my coffee mingling with the crisp linen of my blouse. My reflection in the window showed a composed woman, poised and polished, yet there was a fire behind my green eyes that no one outside this room had ever witnessed. I pressed the ignore button once, twice, but the guilt tugged at me, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd built in secret. Memories surfaced uninvited. That first betrayal, the whispers behind closed doors, the sting of being overlooked and dismissed. And yet, sitting here, in my own high-rise sanctuary, I felt a quiet thrill. This was my empire now, my silent victory, and I was finally ready to confront the past on my own terms. A shiver of anticipation ran down my spine as I stared at my phone. The past had shown up at my doorstep, and this time, I wasn't the one backing down. It had all started 10 years ago, in a cramped office filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of old carpet. I was 24, eager, ambitious, and utterly convinced that blood should mean support, not sabotage. But my cousin, Vanessa, had a different idea. She leaned back in her chair, smirking, and casually said, "Maybe you're not cut out for this, Claire. Maybe it's time someone else took over." My throat tightened, a lump forming as I swallowed hard. My hands trembled slightly, gripping the edge of the desk. It wasn't just the office. It was my dreams, my late nights, my sacrifices, all dismissed as if they were meaningless. Every word she spoke felt like a sharpened blade, cutting away the confidence I'd spent years building. I remembered the long drive home afterward, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windshield, and the gift my grandmother had pressed into my hand, a small, weathered notebook with her handwriting inside. "Write your path," she had said softly. "Even if no one believes in you now, your life will be yours to own." The notebook was fragile, but in it lay an entire world of possibilities, a seed of hope I wasn't ready to let wither. That night, in my tiny apartment with the faint smell of takeout and old books, I made my decision. I wouldn't rely on family loyalty or inherited power. I would carve my own way, however long and painful it might be. I pored over that notebook, jotting down plans, ideas, and strategies. Each page became a manifesto, a silent promise to myself that I would rise, quietly but relentlessly. I remembered the sting of tears I refused to let fall in front of anyone, the sleepless nights spent calculating every step, every risk. Every failure became a lesson, every doubt a fuel for determination. By the time the sun rose over the East River, painting the skyline in soft oranges and pinks, I had decided I was leaving behind the person who underestimated me, and I was stepping toward someone who could never be ignored. Vanessa had taken my office, but she hadn't taken my ambition, my resolve, or the dreams that were quietly growing inside me, waiting for the right moment to bloom. And I knew, deep down, that moment would come. I started small, with nothing but that weathered notebook and the determination burning in my chest. My first office was a cramped, second-floor space above a coffee shop in Brooklyn, barely enough room for a desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. The city outside moved with relentless energy, but inside, it was just me, sketching out business plans, tallying numbers, and whispering pep talks to myself like a mantra. I found a mentor, Marjorie Sinclair, a seasoned consultant who had built her own empire from scratch. She believed in me when no one else did. "Claire," she said one evening as we pored over spreadsheets in that dimly lit room, "you have the vision. But vision without discipline is just wishful thinking. Commit to the work. Trust yourself." Her confidence became a lifeline, a steady hand guiding me through the uncertainty. The first few months were brutal. I battled self-doubt, the gnawing worry that I wasn't good enough, that maybe Vanessa was right, that perhaps I wasn't cut out for this world. Long nights blurred into early mornings. My fingers cramped from typing endless proposals. My eyes stung from reviewing contracts. I remember sipping cheap coffee at 2 a.m., staring out at the dim streetlights, thinking, this is it. This is the grind that will either break me or make me unstoppable. Slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. My first big client came unexpectedly, a boutique real estate firm that had dismissed other agencies. I presented my ideas with quiet confidence, detailing a strategy that was bold but precise. They trusted me. I remember the shock and exhilaration flooding through me as I signed the first contract. My heart raced, but I kept my composure. I was learning that victory didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Every success, no matter how small, became a brick in the tower I was building for myself. First profitable sale. First team member I could truly trust. First investor who believed in my vision without hesitation. And all the while, I kept it a secret from my family. Instagram updates were modest. Phone calls were short and vague. I wanted them to think I was surviving, struggling even, while quietly I was thriving. The real triumph, though, wasn't just financial. It was knowing that I had taken something that once made me feel powerless, my dreams, my aspirations, my voice, and turned it into proof that I could define my own worth. My cousin had underestimated me. My family had doubted me. But I had kept going, fueled by resilience, sharpened by setbacks, and guided by that tiny notebook whose pages were now filled with strategies, milestones, and affirmations. Years passed. I moved into a sleek office overlooking the East River, walls adorned with art that spoke to my journey, abstract pieces that reflected chaos turned into order, struggle transformed into triumph. And finally, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was ruling, quietly, deliberately, with a power no one could ignore. Vanessa thought she had won when she took my office. But what she didn't see was the foundation I was laying, brick by brick, late night by late night, fueled by determination and the unwavering belief that one day I would not just reclaim what was mine, I would tower above it. The knock at my office door was deliberate, hesitant, almost nervous. I knew exactly who it would be before I even looked up. Vanessa. She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished hardwood floor, and froze mid-step when she saw the room. My office had changed since the days she dismissed me. The walls were lined with curated art, abstract pieces that hinted at chaos refined into mastery. My desk gleamed under the soft sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawling below like a kingdom I had quietly built. A small vase of fresh tulips, my favorite, sat beside a sleek laptop, and a leather-bound notebook rested where she could see it, its pages filled with my strategy, my victories, my vision made real. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the view, then to the awards subtly displayed on the shelves, recognition I had received quietly under the radar, while she assumed I was still struggling. Her jaw tightened. She tried to speak, but no words came. She had come expecting the same Claire she had dismissed, a nervous, struggling, unsure woman. But that Claire no longer existed. I leaned back in my chair, fingers lightly tapping the polished surface, and let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight to settle. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, controlled, resonating with confidence I had earned through years of struggle. Vanessa, I began, I see you've come to check on how I'm doing. Her lips parted, a nervous cough escaping as she tried to mask the recognition of her misjudgment. I've been doing more than surviving, I continued. I've been building. That office you took from me, it was only a stepping stone. And now I own this tower. Every contract, every partnership, every success you thought I would never achieve, it's mine. All of it. The color drained from her face, and I saw the realization in her eyes. Shock, disbelief, the subtle shame of someone who had underestimated me. She opened her mouth, but I interrupted gently, letting her take in the space around her. I wanted her to see, fully, what I had created from nothing. This, I gesture to the office, the city outside, the art, the awards, is the life I built without anyone's permission, without waiting for validation. Every milestone, every achievement, it was earned quietly, meticulously. You thought you were ahead. You thought taking my office meant winning. But winning isn't just about space or titles. It's about vision, persistence, and courage. And I had all three in abundance. Her eyes flickered toward the notebook on my desk, and I saw the faint recognition, the one thing that tied my past to my present. The notebook she had once laughed at, dismissed as trivial, had been my secret weapon. Every plan, every note, every strategy one had penned within its pages had become real. She swallowed hard, a mixture of awe and shame painting her features. Claire. I held up a hand. You'll have a moment to process. I won't lecture. I won't gloat. But I will tell you this. Nothing you did could stop me. And nothing will. The room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside. She had come expecting confrontation, maybe even a plea for reconciliation. Instead, she was faced with the undeniable truth. I was no longer the cousin she had underestimated. I was the woman she had tried to sideline, and now I towered above her expectations in every way imaginable. For the first time in years, I felt a strange satisfaction, not bitter, not vindictive, but serene. The girl who had trembled in that small office years ago had grown into a woman who didn't just reclaim what was hers, she had transcended it entirely. And Vanessa, like everyone else who had doubted me, was finally seeing that truth. I watched Vanessa shift uncomfortably, the weight of realization pressing down on her shoulders. I could see it in her eyes, the recognition that the dynamic had changed. The girl who had once cowered and accepted dismissal had become the woman who now held all the cards. And I intended to use them wisely. Vanessa, I said, letting my voice remain calm but firm, this isn't about revenge. It's about clarity, accountability, and growth. I'm willing to help, but only on certain terms. And I need you to hear them fully. She nodded hesitantly, and I outlined the first condition: honesty. No more lies, no more pretending. If you want any part in the future I've built, you need to commit to transparency. Not just with me, but with yourself. Admit mistakes. Take responsibility. Only then can real trust exist. Her lips parted, as if to argue, but I shook my head slightly. Not optional. I can't operate around deception anymore. The second condition was self-improvement. I want to see you invest in your skills, your ambitions, your potential. Complaining about missed opportunities or blaming circumstances won't cut it. You'll need to define what you want to achieve and work toward it with focus and integrity. I paused, letting the words sink in. The office, filled with sunlight reflecting off the glass surfaces, seemed almost to hum with the energy of my authority. And lastly, I continued, you must leave behind habits that undermine growth, entitlement, laziness, arrogance. They don't belong in the people I surround myself with. If you want access to this world, you need to evolve with it. Her hands were trembling now, a mirror of the emotions I had felt years ago, but this time, it wasn't fear or humiliation. It was comprehension. She understood, finally, that she had no leverage here. I was the architect of this reality. I had built it with sweat, late nights, doubt, and relentless perseverance. I softened slightly, letting warmth thread through my firmness. I'm not closing doors, I said. I care about family. I care about potential. But care alone isn't enough. Change has to be visible, measurable. And I will support it, but only if it's sincere. Vanessa swallowed, nodding slowly, and I could see the flicker of recognition that this was a chance, not just for her to regain favor, but for her to redefine herself. I felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had held firm in the face of betrayal. I wasn't punishing, I was teaching. And in doing so, I reaffirmed my own boundaries, my own power, my own self-respect. The balance of power had shifted, undeniably. I was no longer the one to be underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. I was in control, guiding not just my own journey, but offering the possibility of growth to those who had doubted me, under the terms that ensured they learned the lesson life had once taught me so harshly. As I closed my speech, I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunlight catch the edges of my desk. I felt a quiet pride, not just for the empire I had built, but for the grace and strength I had learned to wield in the process. Power, I realized, was most potent when tempered with wisdom, and this was my moment to shine in its fullest form. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and I watched subtle changes unfold. Vanessa didn't transform overnight, but she began showing signs of genuine effort, taking responsibility for past missteps, engaging in her work with focus, and shedding old habits that had once held her back. She was learning, and I found that my satisfaction wasn't rooted in revenge. It was rooted in growth, for both of us. My mornings became moments of reflection. I would stand by my window, the city alive below, and think about the journey that had brought me here. The cramped offices, the sleepless nights, the relentless self-doubt. All of it had forged the woman I had become. Claire Daniels, the woman who didn't just reclaim what was hers, but created something far greater than she had ever imagined. I picked up the leather-bound notebook my grandmother had given me years ago, now worn but treasured, and flipped through the pages. Every scribble, every plan, every note of encouragement reminded me that the seeds of resilience had been planted long before I realized it. The notebook had been my compass, my silent mentor whispering, "Your life is yours to own." And I had. The relationships that mattered to me now were not built on proximity or bloodline alone. They were built on respect, authenticity, and shared growth. I was selective about whom I allowed into my inner circle, yet open to those willing to evolve, willing to embrace accountability, willing to honor their own potential. On one particular evening, I watched Vanessa in the office, no longer bristling under my presence, but working diligently at her desk, a quiet determination in her eyes. I felt a strange warmth, knowing that while our paths had diverged in the past, they were slowly converging in a healthier, more empowering way. The girl who had underestimated me was still learning, but this time, she was learning on my terms. I closed the notebook and placed it carefully on the polished desk. Its edges had frayed over the years, but it remained a symbol of endurance, vision, and the power of believing in oneself. I smiled softly, a quiet affirmation of the woman I had become, strong, independent, and unshakable. The city lights shimmered like a constellation below, and I breathed in the night air through the open window. My journey had been long, arduous, and filled with lessons that had carved out the steel and grace within me. But as I stood there, feeling the hum of my tower beneath my feet, I realized something profound. Victory wasn't just about reclaiming what was lost. It was about owning it fully, transforming it, and rising higher than I had ever imagined. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, with a calm certainty that carried across every corner of my being. I didn't just take back what was mine. I became unstoppable.